Corrine Canty is a leadership coach, culture shaper, and podcast host. She brings over 20 years of corporate experience where she led marketing strategies for some of the world's largest brands, managed teams of all sizes, and coached leaders at every level. Her passion for building human-centered organizations and shaping cultures that prioritize well-being has defined her career. Now, as a leadership coach and advocate for impactful living, and we've got to dig into what that is, Corrine dedicates her time to helping leaders find their voice, overcome fear and doubt, and build workspaces that are engines of well-being and success. I'm smiling because just imagining an engine of well-being and workplace as an engine of well-being is really exciting. She embodies a no-limit lifestyle. She takes bold steps to live the life she desires, all while inspiring others to do the same. Corrine is also the host of the Remember to Live podcast, where she shares powerful insights on living with purpose and embracing change. Whether she's launching new services or guiding others to lead with impact, Corrine is proof that it's never too late to redefine your path and chase the life you truly want. Join me as I sit down with Corrine to discuss leadership, overcoming fear, and the limitless possibilities of living with intention. Corrine, welcome to the Age Has No Limit podcast.
Thank you, Patrice. I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation with you today.
Yes, I'm excited to learn from you. So I follow you on LinkedIn. I read your posts, which I always like pause the scroll because I want to make sure I read what you have to say. You wrote that you remember that there is such a thing as too late, and the only thing holding you back from living the life you want is your own fear and doubt. So as a result, you've come to that realization and you make sure that you take leaps. Why do you believe there is such a thing as too late?
So I used to be one of those people that would constantly say, it's never too late. It's never too late. It's never too late. We hear that almost as a mantra until I became a caretaker to my mother and am watching her in real time live end of life regrets. And so it may never be too late to dream or to desire, but there is a too late to do. There is a time when maybe your body or your brain or a situation prevents you from doing the things that you kept putting on your someday list or your one day list, those lists where you have when I get this title or when I've finished this career, when all of these futuristic living situations. And then you look back and the time is gone, right? And it's too late for a lot of things. And so just watching her, the fact that my father died when I was very young and he never even got to see me grow up really helps me think about living right now and the power of living and remembering to live the life while we're doing all of these things, right? I really believe in putting the living back into making a living because we forget about that part.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like when you just made it very, very clear that, it's never too late to dream and to have, imagine the things that you want. But when you actually may not have the physical abilities to be able to to live out those dreams, or to live the life you want, then, that truly does limit you. It places limitations on you. And that's why you, of course, have to try to do it now for those of us who still have the, physical capabilities to do it. So thanks for immediately making that clear. So what are some of the leaps that you took this year?
I think this year is probably the year out of my entire adult life that I invested in myself the most. Like invested in not only just my businesses, but like things I really wanted to do. And I was a single mom my whole career, and I've been a mom since I was in high school. So everything was always for my kids. And I would find a way for like my son to go to that super expensive, ID Tech camp. But for me to just take a course or to, take a vacation or do something just for me, I'd be like, oh, I can't spend that money. I can't take that time. I can't figure it out. Right. And so now that my children are grown and I'm in this place of looking at my mom, it's like, no, do the things you want to do now. So I've invested the most in things I've wanted to learn. I've taken some of the biggest trips just because I wanted to, not because there was a conference tied to it or I'm celebrating someone else, or it's just I wanted to go do it. And so I think a lot of the leaps that I took this year were just leaps and giving myself permission to live and practice what I preach and do those things
Mhm.
now.
So the two quick follow-ups to that. So I remember those $1,800 ID Tech camps. I also like evaluated. I was like, should I really do this or should I go to this other one? That's so absolutely I understand. And it was never a question about whether or not you should invest in your child, but you're absolutely right. Thinking about spending that kind of money back then for myself would have been out of the question. So
Mhm.
so I'm glad you brought that to your attention. Of the like trips that you've taken and the ways that you've invested in yourself, what do you think has been the most impactful?
I think the most impactful was probably the trip I took earlier this year, which you're very familiar with, of going on
Mhm.
a writing retreat because I've always loved to write. I thought I was going to be a writer my whole childhood and go to art school, and then I became a mom, and so I had to do to be a responsible mom, you have to go get a corporate job and you have to get a 401k, and you can never make money doing art and all of the things. So I always found my creative outlets outside of whatever I should do. Um, but this was the year I said, you know what, I'm going
Mhm.
to really focus on putting myself in a beautiful location, spending a week where nobody can reach me, and get back to writing and get back to myself and reigniting my creativity in a way that I just never made time or space for before.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm so glad you brought that up because that tells me that you came to the retreat with an intention that goes beyond the writing. Obviously, giving yourself space and time to do it, but also it was tied to a bigger goal. And I'm thinking about when I went to the retreat, I was thinking, well, this is something I want to do, and this is a task that helped me get to that thing.
Mhm.
And as a result, I think you have some wonderful results that came out of that retreat that you can probably share with us later if you'd like, but I understand that now because I kept saying to myself, well, I'm going to go back to the writing. I'm going to go back to the writing. And I never really gave myself space and time to do that because I was always so busy doing other things.
Mhm.
I'm going to do that though. Hopefully before the end of the year, I'm going to finish up with some of the things. So really, really glad that you pointed that out, that you've been very intentional and it's actually leading you to accomplishing some other goals that you've always wanted, you always had. So tell us a little bit though about Corrine before she started being so intentional. Tell us a little bit about your corporate experience, your 20 years of corporate experience, the corporate highs, any lows that you want to share.
Yeah. And so being the double only in a lot of rooms throughout my
Mhm.
corporate experience, being the only woman, the only Black woman, it really helped me realize that, you just gotta kind of find a way. I feel like one of the things I got from my mother is the grit of finding a way and making things happen. But a lot of it was because I wasn't doing it for me. Like I never went into corporate saying, "Oh, I'm doing this because I want to climb the ladder, because I want to get a C-suite job." Because I just wanted to be able to have a job that I could provide my kids the life that I wanted to provide them, being a single mom.
Mhm.
I always kind of looked at my job as, well, this is good enough because it wasn't really the creative career I wanted, but it was adjacent because I spent my career in marketing and media and advertising. So there was some creativity in it. But I think what I learned the most about my corporate career is how much our work affects our lives. And so I quickly became a leader early on in my career. And my main focus has always been, how do I help my team and how do I help the individuals who have access to me start to learn how to make the relationship with their employer a mutually beneficial relationship? How do I provide environments, because I needed it as a single mom, where we all could work together and be flexible in our time and our scheduling, and doing it in whatever way I could, because the system is the system. But I spent a lot of time pouring into people. And even though I ended up with a chief operating officer title, I didn't get there because I spent so much time focused on operations and spreadsheets. I got there because I focused on people's lives first and really sat down and understood, like, how do you want to live your life? And a lot of people didn't know. They had the shoulds, and I'd say, no, no, no. I want to know how do you want to spend your days? Like, and I'd give a lot of people homework. And so I became known to like put time on Corinne's calendar to talk about your life because it will change you. And so once we figured that out, then we could say, well, now let's align the things you do, not only with your strengths, but things you want to do. Like, how can we get more joy out of work and more flexibility out of work? Because I understood that the ROI and the bottom line that all the companies cared about came from our people being well.
Yeah.
And if you have a whole workforce of people who are stressed out, burnt out, unhappy, they can sit there for 90 hours, but the
Mhm.
output is not going to be quality and nothing's going to thrive.
Yeah, so much to pick up on that. And because I'm thinking about a few things. Number one, just thinking about, one's, let's say you're having a meeting with one of your direct reports, and instead of talking about the things that one would expect, how's this project coming along, what are your thoughts about the deadline, do you need any support from me, you're asking them to think about what they want from their lives. So I'm sure that that was just not only probably a shocker for them, but also it gave them an opportunity to really think about what they wanted. It also probably gave them they were probably also more interested in helping the team succeed. I'm
Hmm.
wondering if that's one of the benefits of it as well. But so yeah, definitely see the benefit of that, because interestingly, we just came from our staff retreat, our very first staff retreat, and it was the very first time that as a business owner, I thought about the culture I'm building, the team that we have, how we can elevate each other, just all the things outside of work. But I do also want to pick up on something where you said that you basically, being in marketing and advertising, it's very, very deadline driven. I don't know if you and I talked
Hmm.
about this. I also came from advertising. I used to be a media planner, never
Hmm.
made it up because I was like, I'm getting out of here. It's way too much
Yeah,
work.
it's
I'm
a
getting out
lot.
of here.
It's a
And
lot.
then I
Yeah.
then I shifted from advertising to marketing, specifically international direct marketing. Then I was like, okay, I'm getting out of here. It's really deadline driven. How did you manage your career raising two boys? I think it's two boys, right?
A boy and a girl.
Boy and a girl. Okay.
Yeah,
Raising your children as a single mom in such a deadline driven, it's a very deadline driven
it is.
atmosphere. So
It
that's what
is.
I remember. I was like, so I would love to find out, what were some of the things that you did? You did point out that yes, you spoke with your team to make sure that everybody was on the same page, but any specific things that you'd like to share that you did individually to be able to manage that so well?
Yeah, I think, well, the first half of my career, I was in agencies, right? And so even though there's a lot of hours, there is an environment agencies that are kind of flexible. So
Mhm.
there's years where it's like 6 o'clock, I got to go pick James up from daycare and bring him back to the agency, right? And so he has these memories of like being in the agency and everybody giving me candy and doing these things, which in hindsight, like we should have been at home eating dinner and doing things. But I would bring him back to work and make sure that he was with me and finish the work I needed to do. But I realized as I kind of got more up the ranks that that wasn't sustainable. And you have to help people understand how to manage their time better because I would have been at work until late at night, but half of my day was spent not working, right? When you're in an office, you spend a lot of time getting interrupted throughout the day and having people to stop at your desk or talk or I remember having a conversation with one of my bosses, and when I was done with my work, I would leave or salaried, right? So I would leave around 4:30 or 5 so I could
Hmm.
spend time with my kids. And he called me in his office one day and he was like, everyone's looking at you leaving early. You probably shouldn't leave early. And I said, well, I'm done with my work for the day and I can sit and play on the internet like everyone else is doing so they can look like they're working late and
Hmm. Hmm.
get the prestige and the badge of honor of that when we're not actually being productive. Or I can go home and be a mom and come back tomorrow more productive. And so, like, he didn't really have much to say to that, but we came up in the society of like badge of honor. I'm working till 9 o'clock at night. I'm not going to sleep. And that's not conducive to a healthy person or a healthy business. And then the second half of my career, I led mostly remote teams. And so, working in a remote environment, even pre-pandemic,
Hmm.
um, that helps. It really does help when people need different types of, hours in their day based on whether and it doesn't matter if you have children or you're taking care of your parents or you have pets or we all have lives and slices of life and responsibilities outside of our job.
Hmm.
And I also didn't like when people were like single with no kids and everyone just assumed, well, you get to work more because you don't have these responsibilities. Like, no, that's not fair. Everyone has a life and we all have things that nobody knows that we have to take care of. So it's something that we should think about.
So one of the things that I'm hearing from you is similar to something that you posted earlier. I think it was just maybe earlier this week or maybe it was last week, and it was around parent guilt. And it's so interesting. I'm not sure if that's like a term that's being used, but obviously it's a real thing. I remember experiencing parent guilt, because unlike you, I would leave at like 5:30, drive home like a crazy person, so I can pick up my children by 6:30. I don't know if you remember any of those, because
Mhm.
of course childcare ended at 6:30, and after that it was like
Right.
a dollar an hour, right? So
Yes, yes.
I remember that. So, but I'm glad that you, number one, had the flexibility to be able to bring your child back into the office, and of course still get the work done. So tell me what your thoughts are about parent guilt. Do you still experience parent guilt? And just again, would love to get your thoughts about that.
Yeah, and I mean, I do. Hindsight is always, you know, something that makes us criticize ourselves, right? And
Mhm,
but I also have to give myself grace and look back and say, you know what? I did
mhm,
the best that I could in the
mhm,
situation that I was in, right? And
mhm, mhm,
none of us come to this world with an instruction manual on how to be the best parent.
mhm,
All of us have issues or criticisms or something where we're like, well, my mom or my dad or my parents or my guardians or whatever, right? It's just part
mhm,
of, I realized growing up, like we have to kind of find our way as our parents find their way. And
mhm,
I happened to kind of be growing up with my kids because I had my daughter so young, but I realized there's a lot of moments that I wish I would have maybe been there for or spent more time with,
mhm,
because I was either traveling or had to miss some of the games but I did build a good tribe around me. So
mhm,
I had a good support system. So my kids did
mhm,
feel supported, but you can't get those moments back, right? And so I don't
yeah,
beat myself up over it, but I do make sure even now that both of my kids are in their 20s that I'm still creating moments, like that I'm
mhm,
still creating memories
yeah,
as much as possible and I'm present in the moments and I'm documenting the moments. It's funny, my daughter had a birthday this past weekend
mhm,
and me and my partner, my kids, like, we live in Atlanta and they're kind of, out in the club scene. And so they had
mhm,
like a party between my son's graduation and my daughter's birthday. So they were like at the clubs. And so we
mhm,
went with them to go celebrate. And
mhm.
number one, I can only stay out till 4 o'clock in the morning, like once a year at this age. But number two, my
Mhm,
daughter was like, Mom, I realized that her and her boyfriend were talking about it. She was like, I realized that you document a lot of the important moments. And we were talking about how we don't do it enough. And I said, well, number one,
yeah,
it's good enough. I want people to be present in the moment. I'm not documenting it for social media. I think that's a very
mhm,
different thing. Like some
yeah,
people are spend their whole lives just so they can post it.
mhm,
If I'm noticing that it's a special moment that I want to be able to look back at and remember with my children, or I want them to have one day when they want to look back and reflect, I document it. And I think that sometimes documenting it to capture that present moment is a very different energy and intention than, oh gosh, I got to capture everything for social
mhm.
media.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, I'm thinking, of course, I think as moms, as parents, we do that. I remember obviously documenting their, whether it's their accomplishments or maybe challenges that they experienced, but doing it in their 20s, that's an absolutely that the fact that again you're doing it intentionally, that's what
Hmm.
I think I'm learning so much from you, is that I don't just do things, right? Like, remember I posted when you shared a little bit about the fact that you will now be an author, published author. And I
Hmm.
remember saying, wow, she actually recorded her days at the retreat because she intended on, number one, of course, becoming an author. So you knew going in, hey, I'm going to do this. And number two, you recorded some of the days that, before you actually went into some of the retreat activities, so that you can come back and say, here's the before and here's the after. The after is me becoming an author. So I really like that intentionality.
Hmm.
And some of the other things that I've noticed as well. About just the way you approach things that I'm going to try to, incorporate into my life. Now, I'm really good at execution. I'm really good at, the things I know what I'm good at, but there's
Hmm.
some things that I'm also learning that I need to improve. And so you're kind of helping me identify some of those. Now, so you have had an exciting and very successful corporate career, made it all the way to COO. But you also, of course, now are an entrepreneur, and you said businesses. So that
Hmm.
means you have a number of businesses. Let's start with Five to Thrive. What is Five to Thrive? Is it a part? What is it? Is it a program in one of your for one of your businesses? I would love to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, so Five to Thrive is actual a meditation. It's a program. It's something that I give away to a lot of leaders because I suffered extreme burnout where I was in the hospital. Western medicine couldn't help me. There's a lot of things that I had to deal with that. I was writing out my passwords for my kids because I just didn't know what was going to happen. It was like
Mm,
that bad. And I realized that we don't really understand what we're doing to our nervous systems and the way that we
mhm,
work and the way that we never reset and rest. And so
mhm,
I wanted to create a tool,
mhm,
especially for entrepreneurs and busy leaders and people who are constantly on the go,
mhm,
and have them recognize like it literally takes a few minutes to pause and to reset your nervous system so your body doesn't break, right?
mhm,
So you
mhm,
can find the calm, so you
mhm,
can, allow yourself to return to yourself and give yourself the real self-care that you need, as
mhm,
in, shutting off that sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight, activating the
mhm,
parasympathetic nervous system. The best
mhm,
way to do that is with our breath. It's a tool we always have. It doesn't matter if you're in a meeting, you can still use these tools. And so I wanted to teach people tools to be able to keep themselves well while we're
mhm,
trying to do all the things, right? Because we all want
mhm,
to achieve a lot and have meaningful lives and experience a lot of things. But even if we're doing work that we love, if we don't find a way to reset ourselves, it
mhm.
can be problematic.
Oh, so that reminds me, and so this as I remember actually learning from your website that you said that you actually were burnt out, and you've just described that. Thank you for doing that, and that you burnt others out. You burnt people out, and have eventually became certified in what you call a bunch of well-being modalities. And so obviously the breathing and some of this breathing exercise that you help others with, obviously something that you're doing as well. So tell us about some of the well-being modalities that you've
Yeah.
been certified in, and which one do you think led to the most dramatic change for you?
Yeah. So I'm a certified health instructor, certified in Ayurveda. I'm certified in yoga. I'm
Mm-hmm.
also an energy practitioner and Reiki master, and I am
Mm-hmm.
certified in positive psychology and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
I think the tool that's had the most impact on my life is yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And yoga in the real sense of learning how to move my body and actually breathe. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think what really unlocked that for me was when I first started doing yoga many, many years ago, I studied in Ashtanga yoga, which is basically there's a series of poses that you memorize, and there's kind of
Mm-hmm.
a practice in it where you do it daily
Mm-hmm.
and you learn how to breathe with your body movements. But when you
Mm-hmm.
do the same set of poses every day, you would
Mm-hmm.
think that it would be the same every day.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go and do that same set of poses and you're like, oh, I can't really do this pose today. Yesterday I could do it so easy and today I can't. Or, oh, it's hard to breathe in this. Oh, you start to learn like, oh, every day is different. My body is different every day. My mind is different every day. This is a tool to bring me back to myself and to have awareness of what my body's telling me, because I constantly talk about now how we ignore the whispers, right? Our body's constantly talking to us and it's
Mm-hmm.
whispering what it needs every day. And if you
Yeah.
ignore it, it's going to eventually roar. And we don't
Yeah.
want to get to the roars because the
Yeah.
roars are not fun, right?
Yeah. That is so, okay. So every, I want us to have this conversation in an hour. But you're saying so much that I want to follow up on. And so we're going to definitely still stick to the hour. So I'm going to have to prioritize. Every time you speak, I will have to prioritize what I want to follow up on. Rather than the five, we're going to cut it down to the one or two. So number one, I really, really like when you said our bodies speak to us and we don't want it to get to the point where it's roaring, right? And so I
Hmm.
think about the things that, um, sometimes we talk about, oh, my body does this when I eat this, and, all of these different things that your body's communicating to you. I
Yeah.
just really recently learned, like for many, many years, I couldn't eat wheat, just a lot of things, dairy. And it was my
Hmm.
body. Finally, about 6 months ago, I was like, oh my goodness, what I should be doing is being thankful, right? Yes, I eliminated those things from my body, so my body wasn't unhappy with me, but I should be really thankful that my body has this like early detection system that is constantly telling me, you ate something with dairy, you ate something with wheat, you
Hmm.
ate something with soy, don't eat them anymore. So
Hmm.
I'm now really, really happy. So thank you, thank you, thank you for reinforcing and reminding us that our bodies are talking to us. And the second thing is, so I've practiced yoga for years, and I remember thinking to myself, why after you're absolutely right. Why is it that even though I've gotten really good at this pose and my transition's great, why does it still feel a little tight here or and all of these different things that you notice? Number one, you're absolutely right. What you're doing every time you do yoga, once you sit in it and understand it, for me at least, I can't say for
Hmm.
anyone else, is it's helping you focus more on your body.
Hmm.
And that you're right, it's going to be different every day and noticing those differences is actually one of the benefits of practicing yoga to
Yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe, so thank you for bringing that to my attention. So for those of you who are listening, you want to learn more about the awesome Korean Canty, check her out at koreancanty.com. That's COREANCANTY.com. And subscribe to the Remember to Live podcast. And of course, follow her on Instagram at Korean Canty. And you can also find her on LinkedIn at Korean Canty. So we're going to now dig into Korean, the person. So tell us a little bit about where you're from, and anything else you'd like to share about who you are as a person.
Yeah, I am from Michigan. I am a Midwestern girl, even though I've been in Atlanta for 20 years. A lot of people say, well, you're from Atlanta now. And I'm like, no, I'm from Michigan.
Yeah.
I'm definitely Midwestern, born and raised.
Mm-hmm.
I don't miss Michigan winters at all,
Mm-hmm.
but I
Mm-hmm.
definitely got my values in who I am was
Mm-hmm.
foundational there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I realized that for most of my life, my identity has always been Deasia and James' mom, right? I was mother
Mm-hmm.
first because I was a mother before I was even an adult. And so I'm in this phase of life where I'm actually really figuring out, okay, well now who is Corrine?
Mm-hmm.
I'm always going to be their mom, but I didn't have any period of adulthood where I wasn't a mom, right? And so I never
Mm-hmm.
had that self-discovery phase.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of going through it now, with a lot of wisdom under my belt, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm going through it at a point where I can do a lot of reflection and really, you know, get into the space of what impact do I want to make on this world and what
Mm-hmm.
legacy do I want to leave as me?
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna ask you, yeah, what legacy you want to leave as the individual, not just, and just isn't the word that I like to use, but not
Hmm.
just as, a parent,
Hmm.
your parent to your children.
Yeah.
And I've thought about that, and that's part of the reason why I've embarked on some of the things I've embarked on recently, and also dealt with parent guilt, not so much when they were younger, because I did some things to be more available. And so I felt like, okay, well, I did the thing. I
Hmm.
decided to leave my career for 6 years and work part time. So I have no parent guilt about that. And I'm not saying that people who did not should, but in
Right.
my mind, in my experience, but definitely had parent guilt. Well, now I've started a business and they're young adults and I'm not as available. And my God, I don't, all of those things, I still think about that. So it's
Hmm.
interesting that once I saw that post, I was like, yeah, parent guilt is really a thing. So
Hmm.
um now you shared that you've had some uphill battles this year, one of them again being the caretaker for your mom.
Hmm.
First question, how's your mom doing? And the second is, what are some lessons you're learning even from that experience?
Yeah. It's been a year. It's been quite a year. She had a rough fall. She's stable now. She's doing pretty good, but she is battling dementia, and
Mhm,
that's not a fun experience.
mhm,
I think this year has also taught me a lot of patience. At the beginning of the year, I almost felt like I was failing because I had to make the decision to move her and her partner into assisted living. They both lived with me for a few years. Because she just didn't want to be anywhere. But it was twofold. Number one, I couldn't be here every second of the day, and with her
mhm,
dementia and having stoves and things in the house, like it just wasn't
mhm,
safe. But
mhm,
also I realized, and it reinforced the importance in community and socialization, right? Because in
mhm,
my house, she just sat there all day in her
mhm,
chair and just
mhm,
kind of was rotting away. But now she calls me out like, you have to bring me dimes for bingo. And like she doesn't remember anybody. It's like she meets new people every day, but she gets to play bingo and she goes downstairs to eat and she has friends. And
mhm,
I think even if you look at any of the studies or if you've watched that, Netflix Centenarian Live to 100 show,
mhm.
you know that quality of relationships is the number one indicator of happiness and longevity, right? And
Yeah.
I just realized that so many of us don't prioritize our relationships, and especially in this country that I live in the United
Mhm,
States, we do
mhm,
not have a system set up for relationships and connection as people
Mm-hmm.
age. Like we just don't
Yeah.
we don't have it. And so I learned that lesson. But I think the biggest lesson that I've learned in this whole experience is I have to hold space for Corrine, the caregiver who has to manage everything, and then Corrine, the daughter who has to experience this season of life with her mother.
Mm-hmm.
And those are two
Yeah.
very separate spaces that I had to learn how to navigate and allow for both. And
Mm-hmm.
also that there is a such thing as grief now, right? There's anticipatory grief, and a lot of people, we don't talk
Mm-hmm.
about these things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a thing, like anticipatory grief is a thing when you become a caretaker and you're having to help your parents or whoever you're taking care of at the end of life. Like when you're a
Yeah.
mom, you're raising them up. You're like, oh, one day they'll feed themselves. One day they'll walk, like one day they'll go to the bathroom by themselves. One day they'll be,
Yeah.
and it's kind of the reverse. And
Mm-hmm.
so you
Hmm.
do have this anticipatory grief that you have to learn how to manage because I think we also are in a society that we don't talk about grief as a whole enough
Mm-hmm.
in all the ways that we grieve because every time there's a transition or a change in our life, we have to grieve our former selves to accept the new self. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think those have been the biggest lessons in this journey with being a caretaker.
Yeah, and reinforcing, what we started with, there is a too late, right? And so, and I'm wondering if another thing that is coming from this is, like I said, yes, reinforcing the idea that there is a too late, but does it, drive you or motivate you to, want to live your quote unquote best life? Does it, does that continue to do that because you're continuously there seeing what's missing, and
Yeah.
even doing things like, trying to build stronger relationships. So that's interesting you say that because I'm in that same space, slightly different, thinking more about relationships and how to recenter them.
Hmm.
And I don't know how much in your coaching, and I'd love to hear this. This wasn't one of the questions I thought about before. As you're coaching, women who are leaders at the top of their game, CEOs, entrepreneurs that are either new or have been doing this for some time, how much relationships come up in your coaching, and how challenging it may be for them to center relationships? I know
Hmm.
that's a challenge for me because as you're building a business, almost all of your thoughts are about the business. And so I'm going to stop talking because I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, or
Yeah.
anything you can share about that.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand what's important to you. And when you really sit down and have these self-reflection exercises, and one of the things I coach a lot of people on is redefining success on their own
Mm,
terms, right?
mhm,
Because most of us are striving for some version of success that was given to us, that we
mhm,
were told if you do these things and check these boxes, you will be happy and everything will be great. And many of us have checked all the boxes and we're like, well, that wasn't true. Now
mhm,
what? Right. And now
mhm.
I've spent 20 years. I don't have contact with any of my old friends. I don't have any hobbies. I have so many people who are like, I don't even remember what I like to do. Right.
Yeah.
Because all I do is work. And
Mhm,
so, number one, first you have to re-establish the relationship with yourself and get to know who
mhm,
you are
mhm,
underneath all the shoulds that have been piled on. Like, who are you
mhm,
really? How do I reconnect with who I always was, who I am, my inner child? What brings me joy? What allowing myself to just have fun to have fun? Because, I'm a big advocate of play. But
mhm,
also, then it's like, how do I become intentional about my life by making my new North Star being what's the day I want to live? And like,
mhm.
what's my ideal day? Because
Yeah.
life really only happens in the days. And if we know how we want to live, that helps us filter our career decisions, like where we live, what we
Mhm.
do, and
Yes.
then treat connecting just as sacred as any other work meeting and like schedule it. I was just working with one of my clients yesterday, and one of the things that he was working on is like really wanting to reestablish connections. And I said, well, then schedule 30 minutes a week and have that just be pure connection time. Call up an old friend,
Mm,
ping someone.
mhm.
Like we can all carve out 30 minutes a week, right? We can do
Yeah.
something, even if we feel like it's impossible. And then once we get 30 minutes, we'll be like, you know what? I think I want an hour. You know what? I'm going to schedule a lunch. You know what? Like once we give ourselves permission to take a small, tiny step
Mm,
towards the thing, we start to recognize we actually have more power in our lives
mhm.
than we allow ourselves to have.
I just remember I said I wanted to have an hour, Green. You're giving me way too much to follow up on. But I really like, so one of the things that I think that I like that you said is that actually schedule it in. A lot of times we schedule in times to do all the things that, especially for task oriented people like me, I'll schedule things all the time, but I've never thought about scheduling time to just step away, pick up the phone, you know, catch up with friends, all the things that I wish I was doing more. And so that
Mhm.
is just an awesome, awesome, awesome suggestion. And I really appreciate it. And, so that it kind of leads to two things. Number one, would love to learn about your coaching business, your leadership coaching business. What is the name of your leadership coaching business? What area do you specialize in? Because I know some coaches specialize in certain areas. So I'd love to
Mhm.
learn a little bit about that. And then I also want to learn about your business where you actually go in and you help businesses incorporate play into
Mhm.
their culture. So if you can tell, I'm assuming those are the two businesses. Are there any other
Mhm.
businesses? Okay,
No,
right.
no, just those, just
Okay,
those.
okay.
Yeah,
Tell me
yeah.
about both of those. That'll be fantastic.
Yeah, and well, shift to play. I've been a professional improviser for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever worked for me in corporate environment or you've ever just kind of been around me, you've done improv. Like we've played, we've done something.
Mm-hmm.
As me and I'm a co-founder in that business, and the guy who I was co-founded with, he's also in my improv team. We have a BIPOC improv group troupe that we've performed together for about 10 years. And we had talked for a long time about, oh, we need to bring this to corporate because he also had a corporate career, made it to the top of the ladder. And then when we both found ourselves kind of exiting at the same time, we're like, let's bring this to life because improv was one of the tools that we were able to use
Mm-hmm.
to sit at tables and climb ladders and be in rooms that not everybody wanted us to be in, both being,
Mm. Wow.
black people in America.
Yeah.
Um, and it helped us to understand how to, navigate the room and understand energy and think about thought diversity and put ourselves in other people's shoes and all these just amazing skills for critical thinking and creative thinking, innovation, and just also like joy and belly laughs. When's the last time you belly laughed at work? It's really good for
Yeah.
you. And it also helps, to get to know each other better. So
Mm-hmm.
we decided to kind of do that. So that's a really fun business. We do custom programs and workshops, and sometimes people are just kind of want to hire us for a team building event, but you're always going to walk away with something more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And then my coaching business has evolved over the last couple of years. I started out coaching when I first left corporate because a lot of people missed having access to me in that
Mm-hmm.
way.
Mm-hmm.
So that just kind of happened by demand. And so I've done a lot of executive life coaching over the last couple of years. And as I move into next year, my coaching is actually getting even more focused into helping leaders find their voice, especially in this environment and the country that we're in,
Mm-hmm.
and how work is changing
Mm-hmm.
and how important it is to realize you can't just go get a job for 20 years and be okay. Like you have to establish your thought leadership strategy, you have to establish your personal brand.
Mm-hmm.
And like, how do we do that for your voice? Not the shoulds, not the
Yeah.
this is what I should talk about, this is what I should do, but like as we come upon like mid-career, we start thinking more about climbing the ladder. We start thinking about like wanting to make an impact and
Mm-hmm.
meaning and how do I take what I've learned and this wisdom and share it and like leave a legacy and do more. And so because so many of my coaching clients, that was a big part of what happened when we started coaching, like, yeah, let's redesign your life, let's redefine success. But then
Mm-hmm.
how do I give more? How do I be more? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a TEDx speaker and a TEDx coach. And so a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
come to me, want to know more about that path and that journey.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm leaning into helping leaders, learn how to get present in their life so they can be a presence in the world. And so we
Mm-hmm.
can start to eliminate this epidemic of end of life regrets and
Yeah.
start to eliminate this epidemic of keeping our wisdom to ourselves
Mm-hmm.
in playing small and not being as
Mm-hmm.
big as in taking up the space that we really should.
Mm-hmm. 10 follow-ups from that, but we're going to keep it to two. Okay. Now, seriously, so you brought up something, improv. Um, Tell me if I'm understanding this correctly, that part of the reason why you believe you're so good at improv is because sometimes when you're the only in a certain space, you kind of have to improvise. You have to, like you said, you have to improvise. You're sort of always on alert because, um, let me know if I'm understanding that first, because that's immediately when you said that, I was like, that's an excellent point.
Mhm.
When you're the only, or you feel like you have to, uh, conform, there is an improvisation approach. At least that's the way I'm understanding it. Let me make sure I'm clear. That's what you were saying first.
Well, I think it's twofold. I think number one, we innately learn skills to navigate rooms and
Mm-hmm.
situations in a way
Mm-hmm.
that we have to learn how to read everybody else in the room and see where we fit in. But
Mm-hmm.
I think actually going and learning quote unquote rules of improv. I say
Mm-hmm.
that because as children, we all innately know how to do improv. As adults, we
Mm-hmm.
have to make up rules and relearn how to play and engage when put a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of kids in a room. They're going to follow the rules of improv as they play together and create
Mm-hmm.
worlds and explore and build because they know if we're not building together, the fun ends, right?
Yeah.
And so learning the principles of improv, like yes
Mm-hmm.
and thinking,
Mm-hmm.
allows you to also show up in those spaces in a way of being able to be the one in the room that actually connects the ideas and builds
Mm-hmm.
upon the ideas and helps
Mm-hmm.
to push the innovation and the creativity when
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people the first thing out your mouth is either no or yes, but,
Mm-hmm.
which is also just a no. It's just another way of negating. And so
Yeah.
learning how to do that helps to navigate not only building your career, but I also think it helps with your confidence and your connection and your collaboration.
Yeah. So, two other quick things. So, number one, I really like how your businesses complement each other, right? So, you are an executive leadership coach. You're helping people find their voice, and that's where your business is, shifting towards being a core focus. But then also, again, this other business where you actually go into workspaces
Hmm.
and you help people learn how to integrate play into the workspace. So I really,
Hmm.
really, really like that, how complementary they are. And then one other quick thing, though, I'd love to ask, and I keep saying they're quick. It's all quick, I guess. Is around the possibility. Pause here. Let me pause. Sorry, bear with me. The question came and it went. This will all be edited out. I haven't had anything to eat, so bear with me.
It's
I'm
okay.
like, bear with me here. I want to make sure it's something I'm. Hmm. There was so much, really, Kareem. There really was a lot. And I was like, there's so much to process. Yes, now I remember because I remember it stuck with me. I was like, that is so interesting. So one of the things that you said, Kareen, was that and I want you to please correct me if I'm misinterpreting this or explaining it the incorrect way. That one of the things that you are doing is you're helping leaders, really, really find their voices so that they can learn how to operate in a way that's authentic to them. And I sometimes try not to use that word authentic because I feel like it's been overused, but it's true. And so the
Hmm.
only way to really, like you said, use that where you are in your mid-career to really elevate yourself based on your own definition of what success looks like
Hmm.
is to really start with understanding who you are. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you think some of the challenges are. Yes, we know there's societal challenges. What are those some internal things, the things that we're saying to ourselves that, causes us to be stuck and not really understand who we are so that we can be authentic? I have my opinions, I have my experiences. I would love
Hmm.
to learn what your experiences have been in terms of the coaching you do.
Yeah, I mean, well, if for anybody who's studied like positive intelligence, we all have what are called saboteurs, like the voices in our head. And the number one
Mhm.
universal saboteur for all of us is the judge, right? So
Mhm.
we always judge ourselves. And so many of us are too worried about like, am I going to do the right thing? Am I going to say the right thing? Nobody really wants to listen to me. Oh, and then we start comparing ourselves to everyone else in
Mhm.
we can kind of paralyze ourselves or get stuck or like I don't know what my strengths are. I don't know because you've been so busy on the hamster wheel that you haven't took time to reevaluate and understand like,
Mhm.
well, what have I learned over the years? Like
Mhm.
what is my skill set? What am I strong at?
Yeah.
What do I like to talk about? Because it's very real that many of us are really, really good at things that we actually do not enjoy doing at all, right?
Yeah.
But because we started it and we got good at it, we kept getting more of it and we kept accepting it because we got a title or a pay or something associated with it. But like, how do we get back to like, what do we really enjoy? Because number one, you want to have joy in it. Like, we don't want
Mhm.
to spend our lives being somebody else because everyone else is already taken. So let's stop
Mhm.
trying to model ourselves after. We can be inspired by, we can
Mhm.
benchmark, but there's only one you.
Yeah.
And I had a
Yeah.
really great conversation the other day with some friends, and we were talking about the words differentiate
Mhm.
and distinct, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Like sometimes we get too caught up in how you have to differentiate, you have to differentiate, you have to be so different. And it's like, no, you were
Mhm.
born distinctly you. No
Mhm.
one else has had the exact same lived experience. No one else learns the same. No one else speaks the same. No one else thinks the same. Even if you're an identical twin, you still experience the world through your skin in a
Mhm.
different way, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so learning how to get present within yourself
Mhm.
and learning what those things are and understanding what your real points of view are and what
Mhm.
you've really learned and how to share that in a way that feels good and natural and not forced or performative. Because I think we, especially if you're around our age, we've come up in a world of performative leadership. This is what a
Mhm.
leader looks like. This is what a leader sounds like. This is how you have to dress. This is what you got to do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But we never know who's looking and waiting just for us and the many lives that we will impact and give other people permission to be themselves by us
Mhm.
being brave enough and vulnerable enough to lead authentically through who we are.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, here's my question, because I'm going to go back to something that's been an intentional, it really has been an intentional theme, at least for me, because I know a little bit about what you've shared with us when we went on that author retreat. I know a little bit about some of, your experiences that you've shared online. We're going to go back to the too late aspect. Now, you're publishing a book.
Mhm.
How much of the book is about, making sure that we avoid the too late scenarios that many of us are kind of barreling towards? What is the book about that? And if there, if not, what is your book going to be about?
Yeah, yeah. So my book is about basically how to do life better, but
Mm-hmm.
without getting caught up in thinking that we have to have these big drastic changes or these big
Mm-hmm.
drastic transitions. Or, many times people think, well, then for me to change my life, I have to totally quit my job and move somewhere else or become an entrepreneur or vice
Mm-hmm.
versa. Like we think there are these big things that feel overwhelming. And so we don't do
Mm-hmm.
anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But really, it's these small, tiny shifts, the tiny leaps, the
Mm-hmm.
tiny ways that you can restructure your day, the tiny ways that you can really look at and shape your life
Mm-hmm.
that make the big difference, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
how to kind of get more present and live in the day. And
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to have some play and some fun. And so there will be some drawings and some cartoons, but it really is based off that premise of me recognizing that there is a such thing as too late. And
Mm-hmm.
we may not always have the budget or the time to do all the things we want to do, but it does have little things in it. Like some
Mm-hmm.
people really want to take a trip to like Italy or Rome, but they just
Mm-hmm.
can't do it right now, so they don't do anything. So,
Yeah.
but what about finding a really good Italian restaurant and getting an
Mm-hmm.
Italian book and you and your partner playing with speaking Italian at dinner? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how can you start to bring some of these experiences into your life now to set
Yeah.
the seeds of attention for what might come in the future, but also just to have fun and experience it now? Just because you
Mm-hmm.
can't get the big thing doesn't mean there's little ways that you can't enjoy life, be in the moment, create the life that you want right now with
Mm-hmm.
what you have.
Yeah, that is, yeah, that's an excellent point. It's those little steps, just like the recommendation to go ahead and schedule in time to, make that connection, to
Hmm.
rebuild relationships or foster relationships. And so that, that's a great example of exactly what you're doing. And or you're going to be explaining in your book. And from what I understand, you actually have a book deal. Is that right?
Well, I'm working on the deal. I do have a literary agent, and so we are definitely
Yes.
working along that process. And so I'm very excited. We'll be digging back into that full speed after the holidays, which I'm
Hmm.
actually glad because I want to have a little bit of downtime,
Yeah.
downtime at the
Yeah.
end of the year. But it's
Hmm.
been great because it's also forced me to be honest with myself and accountable to myself for like having an actual writing practice. So, because sometimes we can be like, yes, I'm going to do the thing I said, and we do
Hmm.
one thing, and then we get back into our habits and we don't
Yeah.
do the thing we said. So, how do we
Hmm.
build these, accountability practices and find our accountability partners in it so we
Hmm.
can, stay committed to ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so, I'm thinking about accountability now, and we only have just a few more questions. And I thank you again for coming and sharing all of this wonderful experience and knowledge and tips, and just really enjoy it. But now that you brought this up, I'm thinking a little bit about accountability and how our social lives can help with accountability, and
Mhm.
how Again, I'm a task. I can get things done really, really great at accomplishing things, but there are times when I slip up, and I know that having an accountability partner, someone to check in and say, how are you doing? Would definitely help me accomplish more. And
Yeah.
accomplishments aren't necessarily what I'm looking for. It's really, how can I have more of an impact? For example, I haven't really written much, right, since the retreat, but I know that had I taken you up and maybe a few others on having an accountability partner, would have been further along. Or another program that I'm in, a fantastic program that I'm in, and I just emailed them and said, hey, can I ask for an accountability partner?
Hmm.
Because that social, something about that, this other person, you don't want to let them down, I think. Or it's maybe just having that relationship, and the relationship is formed and embedded based on you all accomplishing this thing together.
Yeah.
I think that's just something that I'm just now starting to realize,
Yeah.
at my in my big age, as they say, at 53. So, so again, if you guys would like to learn more about Corrine and her work, check out her website, CorrineCanty.com. And again, it's COREANCANTY, and subscribe to the Remember to Live podcast. She's had that podcast for a year. So
Hmm.
a lot of content, a lot of, some of the things that I was trying to pick back on. I'm sure a lot of that shared in her podcast. So go check her out. And of course, you can follow her on Instagram and on LinkedIn at Corrine Canty. So as we wind down, I would love to know your thoughts about aging in general,
Hmm.
and how do you think aging has made you better? And what do you think is the definition of better?
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you said what's the definition of better, because I really have leaned into that word this year. I'm actually
Mhm.
about to launch a newsletter with that title
Mhm.
because I really like action words. And so I'm the type of person that when I'm really thinking about something, I will go look up all the definitions and all the dictionaries and see like, well, sometimes we use words and we don't even know what they mean, right? We just
Mhm.
kind of use them.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate better as a verb, which
Mhm.
means to improve a condition or
Mhm.
improve yourself as a person or improve a situation, right? So it's really to improve.
Mhm.
And one of the things I strive on is improving
Mhm.
myself every day. Like I want to be a little bit better than yesterday. I
Mhm.
want to make my life a little bit better than yesterday. And
Mhm.
that's kind of the goal of looking into the future for me. Instead of saying, I want to be this new title or I want to do this thing, like, no, I just want to be a little bit better the next day,
Mhm.
right? I just want to make things a little bit better. I just want the world to be a little bit better. I just want
Mhm.
that person to be a little bit better when they
Mhm.
met me than before they met me. You know, how can I just leave a little mark upon
Mhm.
the person that I'm engaging with? And so that's also something I think that I've learned as I age and start to have like real reflection across my life and what I've
Mhm.
done and what I've leaned into. And it's funny, I was just talking to my friend the other day. Um, my mother did not enjoy, she still doesn't. She's in her 80s, but like she did not like getting older. Like she was one of the people who was very critical of herself when she first got gray hairs or a wrinkle or all the societal standards that are put on women when it comes to the physicality of aging.
Mhm.
And so it's funny because she's flabbergasted that I
Mhm.
don't plan on covering up my grays. Like she'll see my gray hairs and be like, you know that you have gray hairs. Are you not going to dye it? And I'm like, no,
Mhm.
mom. Like she might not remember anything else, but she can look at me and say,
Yeah.
you should do these things. And it's like, no, actually, I feel good about it. Like these are earned. Like I've been
Mhm.
alive long enough to have earned this, and not everybody gets to live this long. You
Mhm.
know, not
Yeah.
everybody has been able to have as many lived experiences as me. And so the older I get, the more I realize it's a blessing to have the wisdom that I've accumulated and to know that I get to keep learning and growing every day. And every day I can wake up and learn and grow more.
Mhm.
And I was talking to one of my clients and we were
Mhm.
talking about this idea of like they're very they get very overwhelmed when someone's like, well, what is your purpose or what is your why? And they
Mhm.
think that it has to be this very specific thing.
Mhm.
And I say, like, my why is to get to the end of this thing with no juice left, right? My
Mhm.
purpose is to show up
Mhm.
fully as I can every single day and experience the day that I'm blessed with. Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be more than that. And I
Yeah.
think that's my biggest lesson as I get older and realize that there's probably more time behind me than there is in front of me.
Wow. So we have two questions left. I ask this of every guest because I think it's important for us to hear all the different ways that people view aging. You just gave an excellent answer about, how aging has made you better and what better means to you. So my question that I ask everyone, and everyone's given me a different answer in the 53 guests that I've had. What does an age has no limit life look like to you? What does that mean to you?
It means throw out the boxes. I
Mm,
think that's the biggest thing. It means throw out the boxes and the shoulds and like the fact that I was club hopping with my kids until 4 a.m. last Saturday. A lot of people are like, what do you mean you went to the, like, what? My kids are going to the club. I want to have the experience. I like to dance. Like, I can still move my body. It's like,
yeah.
and some people would be like, why would you ever do that? And I'm like, look, I'm sorry if your kids don't think you're cool. But mine think I know, but
Yeah.
it's like, I want to experience life.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of things where people will say, well, at your age, you should. At this age, you
Mm,
should. This is what you should be doing. And it's like, no, because my
mhm.
my inner child, my 8-year-old self is still in there. And she's like, I want to
Yes.
go play. Can we have
Yeah.
fun? Like, can
Mhm.
we color? Can we draw? Can we skip down the road? Can we dance in
Mhm.
the middle of the street? Like, who made the rule that the older we get, that life has to stop being fun and that
Yeah.
you have to be strict and rigid and whatever you
Mhm.
want to label responsible as, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That I really am just absorbing because I'm thinking about the similarities between what you just experienced with your daughter at the concert or clubbing with her until 4 a.m. I'm actually going to be doing something very similar in 2 weeks. And I remember thinking to myself, should I be going to this concert with my daughter? It probably won't end until like 3 or 4 in the morning. And I was like, bump that. I'm going to the
Mm.
concert. I love this kind
Yes.
of music. She likes this kind of music. We're going to go and enjoy that together. It doesn't matter what people think. In fact, we're also going to go climb, climb this. We're going to climb up falls. We're going to go to a
Yeah.
falls and we're going to climb it together. And I remember thinking the last time we did it, I was the adult, she was the child, but you know what? We're now adults and I'm still going to go and enjoy that. So,
Hmm.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because I am throwing out the boxes. I've been throwing out the boxes for years. And I think a lot of us, including many of the listeners, are also in the middle of throwing out boxes. I explained to
Hmm.
you that I'm climbing out of my box. I'm unboxing
Yeah.
myself. And so I really appreciate that we're ending on that note because I think that's just a fantastic way for us to, remind people that life is to be lived. It should be
Yes.
lived better. And there is such a thing as too late. And that's
Hmm.
something that we've learned from Corrine. Thank you so much, Corrine, for sharing so much knowledge, for giving me so much follow-up questions that I really couldn't follow up on. Just so much wisdom. And I definitely now see you know, how people have kind of followed you from when you actually maybe supervise them, or maybe they knew at work to just saying, hey, I'd love to continue learning from you while you're also learning yourself. So
Hmm.
I appreciate the time that you took to spend and share more with the Age Has No Limit podcast and our listeners. And of course, you've been an example of what we're trying to do here, and that is to show everyone that age has no limit.
Hmm. Thank you for having me.